All right, and we are live. Let me tweet
All
out
right,
this link.
welcome to King Pilled, everybody. Very sorry that Matthew Erickson has been such a
Yeah, well,
goddamn
this is
degenerate lately, but here we are. We're this is a King Pilled episode of Brian
hi.
Movie's
I'm
channel.
Matthew Erickson.
So
This is
this
what I look
way
like
you
with
can't
my
get.
beard shaved. This is what I look like with my beard
There's
shaved
someone
off.
I
And
wanted to do. Well, he was there was just so much to.
dude,
I
you're all fucked up.
Got a ro- we got
Steve,
robot Steven.
yeah, we got Robot Steve right now. He's all digitized. It's like I think it's because he's moving right now. But yeah, I think your connection's fucked up a little there, Steve. But I'm going to go ahead and just take a few questions for my inner circle. For my while we're waiting on people to join. And the for as part of my subscribe for my subscribing listeners, I do take questions. And there we go. How about that? I have a banner that moves across the screen now. Isn't this great?
Man, I it's been a minute. I'm happy to see you have banners that move across the screen. You're very fancy.
I know. I feel so fancy right
No,
now.
actually, to be honest with you, the last thing I saw was when you talked to Sal Mayweather.
Mm-hmm.
That was awesome. That was the last thing that I saw of yours or anybody.
Oh man, that was a while ago, dude.
Yeah.
You've been gone.
Yeah, I've been kind of doing my own thing lately. I was just waiting for you to get at me to do this, and I haven't even been doing.
I like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just wanted to. Yeah, so let me go ahead and take a one or two. There's like two questions I got, and I usually do like a kind of weekly AMAs now. So
Cool.
I just take questions and answer them, and as part of the show while I'm waiting on people to join. And here we go. And just one question is, what's your thoughts on things like international medical tourism? Are these effective ways of basically, let me see, he rephrased this. Is international medical tourism an effective means of combating state power in introducing global competition in healthcare? And I have kind of mixed feelings about it because it's one problem. You have to kind of move. You're going to the supplier, so that like already you kind of have to be mobile. So like you're cutting out like the bottom like 1/3 of people who are kind of the big cost base anyway. And so is it effective? Yeah, you can go to like Mexico and get drugs way cheaper than here, and you don't need a prescription half the time. Ditto Canada. But yeah, it's like if your healthcare system around you is just ungodly expensive, and you can afford to maybe go to another country for treatment, that might be the way to do it. It might just be worth your cost to just travel and stay there for a little while. But it's but that travel cost really just it adds up. I'm not sure about how good that is. If you could actually get like drugs shipped in from Mexico or something like that, that might be better. Insulin, I'm pretty sure that needs to be refrigerated, so that might not work for most people. But that was that. So my thoughts on medical tourism is that it's good, but you kind of have to already have the means, to afford it. And if you already have that kind of means, you don't really have to go. It's kind of like that sort of thing where you have to show in order to get a loan, you first have to prove you don't need it, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so that's the I don't know about how effective that is, but if push comes to shove, it's like worst case scenario, yeah, okay, that's I would probably just go to Mexico to get some treatment or get some drugs if I really need them. But if I just can't get them in the state. But yeah, that's that kind. Yeah, so that's my opinion of medical tourism. Sorry, I don't have much more information. But I've heard Singapore is excellent. But that's on the other side of the planet. Oh well. But Singapore has quite a lot of medical tourism that you can go with. But anyway, want to go ahead and get started and say welcome to all three of you who have not been in the you are not cool enough to be at Tom Woods 2000. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, dude, I saw that on Twitter. I'm like, oh boy, we're gonna get nobody watching this right away.
Yeah, it's like we're going going live right around the time he's fixing to get started. So this is going to be
This
tough.
is a-
This is going to be tough.
This is a hot take right here. But what we are doing, and I don't know what Tom Woods could be doing right now that would be more important and practical for everyday life. I mean, and I've been to Tom Woods' house, and it was great, and I wish I was there at the 2000 episode and whatever. It sounds like it's a lot of fun, but this is just such an incredible book. It's just so important. I mean, this is just like peeling back the matrix for everyday life and just how the world operates.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. This book, I've read it like 3 times, and the first time I read it, it really changed my life. Chapter 1 hit me hard because I used to be super critical, and and that really changed. I never got like I don't know, people have gotten upset at the Praxians or post libs for being really viciously critical of libertarians. Probably even though they deserve it, but I've been trying to be a lot more lax or lighthearted in my criticisms lately, just because I've been reading this again, and I'm like, God, he's making such good points.
Yeah,
and just
how he starts chapter 1. I mean, the very top in bold letters. If you want together, don't kick over the beehive.
Oh yeah, that's a perfect way of putting that.
When did you guys read this? Like, at what stage in your life?
Well, I was about 36 years old. When Andrew told me that he wanted to do this, so I went and bought a copy of it. I didn't read it up until now.
Wow. What about you, Andrew?
I would have been probably 17 my first time.
Ooh.
And so I made it through most of high school wishing I had something like this. This would have been much better to have it like 9th grade than at I mean, God, heck, if you made kids in middle school read this every single year, as like assigned reading, can you imagine how much less shitty middle school would be for everybody?
I don't know. I don't know if middle schoolers would have like the emotional maturity to really get what I don't know. I think this is a book.
Drill it into their heads. But this is assigned reading 3 years in a row. To make sure you really that you hit the point home.
So,
and
a little backstory for myself. I went to 7 different grammar schools. I either made friends or didn't have any. So I kind of learned on my feet right away. Growing up at a young age, so I didn't really, even find a book like this necessary for me in that instance. But, after reading it, like I agree with you. It totally makes sense that people should read it at some, multiple times at some point in their lives.
I remember just kind of hearing that. I think my mom used to say that the world runs on bullshit or is oiled with bullshit. The gears are oiled with bullshit or something like that. And it's just like, that's something that you can just kind of agree on, like the more like life you live and everything like that. This just kind of really gives the formula for the exact bullshit
right.
that oils the gears.
So that's what I was going to say. Like, as I was reading this, I'm like, oh, okay. So that's how, like, I know that's how it works. This is how I live my life. But, actually seeing someone else put it eloquently in a book, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. That's what I've been doing. I just didn't know that that's what I was doing, or what it was called.
And it's even zooming out and kind of seeing that the author of the book, coincidentally had a similar name, to a very influential and powerful person, and changed the spelling so that it would be exact, and it's such a meta experience to just really understand the whole context of it. And it's your impulse to just kind of be like, oh man, what a snake, what an oily guy. But it's
yeah. No, I mean this. Chapter 1 is where we're going to start, and I think you guys are going to see pretty quickly. For when you guys get around to listening this after you get done with the way cooler Tom Woods 2000 event. You guys will I think this is, I titled this perfectly as, how to win friends and overcome autism, because this is, probably this is like the Machiavellians for, autism.
Yeah.
This is how to not be autistic. This book changed my life. And, it's like my grandfather gave it to me, and initially I kind of took it as an insult. I'm like, I know how to do this. And then I got to read it. I'm like, oh yeah, actually, these are really good points. Actually, it's good to actually consciously think about it now. And I probably won't. Yeah, we're going to do probably probably 5 or 6 chapters out of this, because this is a long book. This is not like Sun Tzu.
It's not like Art of War.
Yeah, Art of War, you can do that in one sitting. This is substantially longer, and you'll probably do 5 or 6 chapters out of this, but because there's just so many really good life lessons for how to deal with people, and get them to like you genuinely for because you're a nice person. This is a book on how to be a nicer person, and it's like this would be up there with like Rothbard. If I ever take over a public school, this is one that we're going to start teaching the kids, and this is going to make them pay attention, because they're like, oh, okay, so school's not completely useless anymore. But yeah, so anyway, let's go ahead. I'll start the reading. Chapter 1. If you want to gather honey, don't kick over the beehive. On May 7th, 1931, the most sensational manhunt New York City had ever known had come to its climax. After weeks of search, Two Gun Crowley, the killer, the gunman who didn't smoke or drink, was at bay. He was trapped in his sweetheart's apartment on West End Avenue. 150 policemen, detectives laid siege to his top floor hideaway. They chopped holes in the roof. They tried to smoke out Crowley, the cop killer, in quotes, with tear gas. They then mounted their machine guns on surrounding buildings, and for more than 1 hour, New York's fine residential areas reverberated with the crack of crystal fire and the rat-tat-tat of machine guns. Crowley, crouching behind an overstuffed chair, fired incessantly at the police. 10,000 excited people watched the battle. Nothing like it had ever been seen before on the sidewalks of New York. When Crowley was captured, Police Commissioner E.P. Mulrooney declared that the two-gun desperado was one of the most dangerous criminals ever encountered in the history of New York. He will kill, said the commissioner, at the drop of a feather. But how did Two-Gun Crowley regard himself? We know, because while the police were firing into his apartment, he wrote a letter to whom it may concern, and as he wrote, the blood flowing from his wounds left a crimson trail on the paper. In his letter, Crowley said, "Under my coat is a weary heart, but a kind one that would do nobody any harm." A short time before this, Crowley had been having a necking party with his girlfriend on a country road out on Long Island. Suddenly, a policeman walked up to the car and said, "Let me see your license." Without saying a word, Crowley drew his gun and cut the policeman down in a shower of lead. As the dying officer fell, Crowley leaped out of the car, grabbed the officer's revolver, and fired another bullet into the prostrate body. And that was the killer who said, "Under my coat is a weary heart, but a kind one that would do nobody any harm." Crowley was sentenced to the electric chair. When he arrived at the death house, in Sing Sing, did he say, "This is what I get for killing people"? No. He said, "This is what I get for defending myself." The point of the story is, Two-Gun Crowley didn't blame himself for anything. Is that an unusual attitude among criminals? If you think so, listen to this. "I have spent the best years of my life giving people the lighter pleasures and helping them have a good time. And all I get is abuse, the existence of a hunted man." That's Al Capone speaking. Yes, America's most notorious public enemy, the most sinister gang leader who ever shot up Chicago. Capone didn't condemn himself. He actually regarded himself as a public benefactor, an unappreciated and misunderstood public benefactor. And so did Dutch Schultz before he crumpled up under gang bullets in Newark. Dutch Schultz, one of New York's most notorious rats, said in a newspaper interview that he was a public benefactor, and he believed it. I have some interesting correspondence with Lewis Laws, who was the warden of New York's infamous Sing Sing prison, with for many years on this subject, and he declared that few of the criminals in Sing Sing regard themselves as bad men. They are just as human as you and I, so they rationalize, they explain. They can tell you why they had to crack a safe or be quick on the trigger, on their trigger finger. Most of them attempt by a form of reasoning, fallacious or logical, to justify their antisocial acts, even to themselves. Consequently, stoutly maintaining that they should never have been imprisoned at all. If Al Capone, Two Gun Crowley, Dutch Schultz, and the desperate men and women behind prison walls don't blame themselves for anything, what about the people with whom you and I come into contact? John Wanamaker, founder of the stores that bear his name, once confessed, I learned 30 years ago that it is foolish to scold. I have enough trouble overcoming my own limitations without fretting over the fact that God has not seen fit to distribute evenly to man the gift of intelligence. Wanamaker learned this lesson early, but I personally had to blunder through this old world, for a third of a century before it even began to dawn on me that 99 times out of 100, people don't criticize themselves for anything, no matter how wrong they may be. Criticism is futile because it puts a person on the defensive and usually makes him strive to justify himself. Criticism is dangerous because it wounds a person's precious pride, hurts his sense of importance, and arouses his resentment. I'm going to pause right there for discussion. This is powerful. It's like that. I have noticed this over and over and over again. Whenever I criticize people, invariably they get defensive and they try to explain themselves. They don't try to try to be understanding. They don't try to listen. And I think this is simply human nature. And I think that I'm always reminded of the saying that no one is the villain in their own story. Whenever they're telling the story, they're telling it from their point of view of them being the good guy. And this is something I was also reminded of in my Catholic upbringing, where I was always taught evil is a parasite. It always pretends to be the good, and it always sees itself as the good, and it's not. Obviously, it's still evil, but it always pretends that it's not. And it sees itself that way, and in that sense, it always, it's like you don't always, it's like when you call people evil, they, in their heart of hearts, they don't believe that about themselves. And this is one of those points I've made, with my archotropism talks, is that when people, when we're talking about like aggression and stuff and why it has value to people and why you say, oh no, only evil people want aggression. And I'm like, actually, most evil people see themselves as the good guys. Mm-hmm. And usually the more evil they are, the more they see themselves as the good guys, the more hardcore that belief is. But that just goes down to the average ordinary person. They all see themselves this way. They all see themselves as the good guys. So, how are you supposed to say, oh, well, we don't, want, bad aggression or good aggression or whatever. They all see it as good. When they're the ones doing it, they all see it for that they're the good guys, all using force. And yeah, that's a problem because they're all, and that's never going away. So trying to, criticize people and, say, oh, you guys are all blood-soaked monsters, yada, 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 yada. And, you turn to like maybe the Republicans and say, you guys all believe in liberty or you don't believe in liberty or you're warmongers or whatever. It's like, oh, and by the way, let me tell you why I'm right about everything. It's like, this is not an attitude that's going to, endear people to you and actually make them want to change their minds. It's like that, you don't get anywhere by simply criticizing people, at least not directly, not personally. And that, and that's, something you really learn as you grow up, is that, criticism really is futile. Go ahead. Either of you take it away.
Oh yeah, I agree. And the thing is you almost remember the negative things that happen to you more than the positive things a lot of times. Like, you kind of look at things like, oh well, the positive happened as it should have, so I don't have to regard it. But every time something bad happens to you, um, you that sticks in your mind more than anything. And that's exactly what criticism is. It's a negative thing that happens to you, in your mind. Obviously, it's not nothing is really happening to you, but um, it has the weight and the effect of something physical happening to you in a lot of cases. You try to move away from things that are uncomfortable. Not many people actually kind of run towards things that are uncomfortable, and this is something that's no different. So uh, if you criticize someone, then what happens in their mind is they're gonna try to stay away from you because they don't want that negative thing that they see coming anywhere near them to ruin their day or their minute or their life or whatever.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And the thing is, like, Bob Marley. I always say this. A lot of people have heard me say this, but it's very pertinent to this. Bob Marley in one of his songs said, "Every man thinks that his burden is the heaviest."
Yeah.
And that's what this criticism could also be likened to, is a burden. And obviously you're going to try to lighten your burden any way you can, which is, in this case, would be people avoiding you because they know you're a burden. They don't want to hear what you have to say because you're just you know making them uncomfortable at the least.
Yeah, I mean, people like people who make them feel good, and this is a kind of a life lesson. Because I ended up giving this book to my wife. When not like when we, a little bit after we first met, because she kind of likes these sort of self help kind of books. These are her thing, and and she and I, got to talking about, like I feel like this is almost like manipulating people or something like that when you're trying to stay away from criticizing or whatever. And what I pointed out to her is, well, actually, this is just trying to get results out of people. That it's not really manipulation, because let's face it, they don't like, they don't want you to criticize them, and they want you to praise them for their good works, because that's the flip side to this. And that's like, I think that's chapter 2. I'm not sure, but the the flip side to not criticizing them for bad behavior is praising them for the good behavior. And Carnegie actually talks about this later in the chapter, that if you praise people for their good behavior, they'll learn to do that good behavior quite a lot faster, because they like the praise. That's part of their incentive system. And whereas if you're purely criticizing them for bad behavior, that no, they're just not going to do that, because they're just going to do the minimum to avoid the criticism, and that doesn't get them to actually behave a good way, the way you want them to.
All right. So I have one part. It's just like a sentence that's highlighted, and it says, the resentment that criticism engenders can demoralize employees, family members, and friends, and still not correct the situation that has been condemned.
Yeah.
That's basically what you just said.
And the next paragraph here says that I think you're
I'm
like
a little
one
ahead of that, yeah.
Yeah, you're like one or two paragraphs ahead of me. But yeah, that's about right. That, B.F. Skinner, the world famous psychologist, proved through his experiments that an animal rewarded for good behavior will learn much more rapidly and retain what it learns far more effectively than an animal that simply punished for bad behavior. Later studies, have shown that the same applies to humans. By criticizing, we do not make lasting changes and often incur resentment. Hans, I can't pronounce that last name, Selye, another great psychologist, said, "As much as we thirst for approval, we dread condemnation." The resentment that criticism engenders can demoralize employees, family members, and friends, and still not correct the situation that has been condemned. There is that line. And George B. Johnston of Enid, Oklahoma, is the safety coordinator for an engineering company. One of his responsibilities is to see that employees wear their hard hats whenever they are on the job in the field. He reported that whenever he came across workers who were not wearing hard hats, he would tell them with a lot of authority of the regulation and that they must comply. As a result, he would get solemn acceptance, and often after he left, the workers would remove the hats. He decided to try a different approach. Next time he found some of his workers were not wearing their hard hat, he asked if the hats were uncomfortable or did not fit properly. Then he reminded the men in a pleasant tone of voice that the hat was designed to protect them from injury and suggested that it always be worn on the job. The result was increased compliance with the regulation with no resentment and emotional upset. You will find examples of the futility of criticism bristling on 1,000 pages of history. Take, for example, the famous quarrel between Theodore Roosevelt and President Taft, a quarrel that split the Republican Party, put Woodrow Wilson in the White House, which, by the way, as libertarians, we all know that was horrible. This is the Woodrow Wilson was, we got the horrible horrors of the 20th century because of criticism. Yeah. Something simple like that, something simple like this gave us all the horrors of the 20th century. Let's find out how. You will find, rewinding a little bit, you will find the examples of the futility of criticism bristling on 1,000 pages of history. Take, for example, the famous quarrel between Theodore Roosevelt and President Taft, a quarrel that split the Republican Party, put Woodrow Wilson in the White House, and wrote bold, luminous lines across the First World War, and altered the flow of history. Let's review the facts quickly. When Theodore Roosevelt stepped out of the White House in 1908, he supported Taft, who was elected president. Then Theodore Roosevelt went off to Africa to shoot lions. When he returned, he exploded. He denounced Taft for his conservatism, tried to secure the nomination for a third term himself, formed the Bull Moose Party, and all but demolished the GOP. In the election that followed, William Howard Taft and the Republican Party carried only 2 states, Vermont and Utah, the most disastrous defeat that the party had ever known. Theodore Roosevelt blamed Taft. But did Taft blame himself? Of course not. With tears in his eyes, Taft said, "I don't see how I could have done any differently from what I have." Who was to blame? Roosevelt or Taft? Frankly, I don't know, and I don't care. The point I am trying to make is that all of Theodore Roosevelt's criticism didn't persuade Taft that he was in the wrong. It merely made Taft strive to justify himself and to reiterate with tears in his eyes, "I don't see how I could have done any differently from what I have." Or, take the Teapot Dome oil scandal. It kept the newspapers ringing with indignation in the early 1920s. It rocked the nation. Within the memory of living men, nothing like it had ever happened before in American public life. Boy, is that not true. But we won't get into that. Here are the bare facts of the scandal. Albert B. Fall, Secretary of Interior in Harding's cabinet, was entrusted with the leasing of government oil reserves at Elk Hill and Teapot Dome, oil reserves that had been set, that had been set aside for the future use of the Navy. Did Secretary Fall permit competitive bidding? No, sir. He handed the fat, juicy contract outright to his friend Edward L. Doheny. And what did Doheny do? He gave Secretary Fall what was pleased to call a loan, in quotes, of $100,000. Then, in a high-handed manner, Secretary Fall ordered the United States Marines in the district to drive off competitors whose adjacent wells were sapping oil out of the ground at the ends of guns and bayonets. These competitors, driven off their ground at the ends of guns and bayonets, rushed into court and blew the lid off the Teapot Dome scandal. A stench arose so vile that it ruined the Harding administration, nauseated an entire nation, and threatened to wreck the Republican Party and put Albert B. Fall behind prison bars. Fall was condemned viciously, condemned as few men in public life have ever been. Did he repent? Never. Years later, Herbert Hoover intimated in a public speech that President Harding's death had been due, to the mental anxiety and worry because a friend had betrayed him. When Mrs. Fall heard that, she sprang from her chair, she wept, she shook her fists at fate, and screamed, "What? Harding betrayed by Fall? No! My husband never betrayed anyone. This whole house full of gold would not tempt my husband to do any wrong. He is the one who has been betrayed and led to the slaughter and crucified." There you are, human nature in action. Wrongdoers blaming everybody but themselves, and we are all like that. So when you and I are tempted to criticize someone tomorrow, let's remember Al Capone, Two Gun Crowley, and Albert Fall. Let's realize that criticisms are like homing pigeons. They always return home. Let's realize that the person we are going to correct and condemn will probably justify himself or herself and condemn us in return. Or, like the gentle Taft will say, "I don't see how I could have done any differently than what I have." And I really, like that part hits home for me, that this is human nature to, to always want to see oneself as the good guy, because no one wants to see, himself as the bad guy, unless you're like some like psychopath or something like that. No one wants that. And every libertarian is going to be, in here thinking that, they're in here and they criticize people thinking that they're in the moral right. And these people, they come back and defend themselves thinking that they're in the moral right. And, the point of this chapter is that this is actually a futile exercise. It doesn't work, and all it does is turn people off to you and make them not want to listen to you and want to tune you out. And this, and if you're in the business of politics, and particularly if you have a spread the message, sort of mentality, well, okay, part of that is being a good messenger. And, and understanding that, criticism doesn't help you be a good messenger. It really doesn't, unless you're criticizing the enemy. Like my mother would always say, if you don't have anything nice to say, Andrew, say it about Hillary Clinton. I'm just kidding. She never told me that, but she might as well have. And yes, like, okay, understand you are here to spread a message, and let's just go with that. If you are one of these libertarians who are really believe in spreading the message, part of that has to come with, okay, well, maybe we should be quite a lot less critical of the people of our audience. And when you separate yourself off into a third party, because the other parties just suck so much, and it's like, oh, you're already starting by sending bad signals to people that they're either unworthy of your presence or of your principle, and you're not one of them because they're so bad or whatever. This is not, I mean, like just that action by itself is a criticism of other people. And perhaps you don't intend it that way, but that is in fact what it is. And as we've seen so far, everybody sees themselves as the good guy. They don't see themselves as the bad guy. And and so you need to understand that in mind. And when you're going through this criticism, one thing I've learned to do is always be understanding of people, in the sense that I'm actively showing them that I understand that they're the good guy, and that whatever mistakes I think they've made, I say, oh, here's what your thought process probably was, and you probably thought it through as a you thought you were doing the right thing, maybe you may, and it was probably just an honest mistake, and going out of my way to make their defense for them, and then shovel my idea in or whatever. And usually that ends much better, because I'm showing them that I don't think that they're the evil person or a bad person, and honest mistakes happen. We're all human, yada yada yada. That works substantially better with people. There's go ahead.
There's an amazing line, and I don't know if you read it or not, but it might be further down the road. But and it's not a lie. You can say it and very technically not be lying. If I were you, I would have done the same thing.
Yes.
And it is demonstrably true, because that
Mhm.
person is them, and they did what they did. And if you were them, by observing the fact that they in fact did what they did, you as them would have done the exact same thing. And like, that's just wild to like wrap. I mean, it's, you can use it just in the sense of it's just kind of like a BS thing that you can say and mean it. But I mean, if you also think about it, it's kind of powerful. You know, I mean, these people are never particularly acting from a place that they would consider to be irrational.
Yeah.
Like no one, and even if they are in the moment, like they're never gonna think that. Maybe in some retrospect,
Yeah.
outside of that, situation with some more perspective and reflection and things like that. But just like in the moment, it's like, yeah, if you were them and you had all of their quirks and their history and their experience, in life, you would find yourself doing the exact same dumb thing that they did. And that's who you are talking to in any conversation.
Yeah. And what particularly doesn't help is if you start getting your emotions in on in on a conversation where you're being critical of somebody else, because I mean that you're just immediately going to turn them off. And what Messina just talked about, you really need to show them you understand them. This is like the first step, because people really have a deep longing to be understood by other humans. And when you show that to them, that yeah, it's like, I understand exactly where you're coming from, and I can make the argument for your thought process or whatever even better than you can. And that shows them that you really have taken the time to understand them. And sometimes they'll just want to repeat it to themselves, and what you do in those circumstances is just shut up, shut your mouth, let them talk, and agree with them, feed them, and you agree with them, agree with them, agree with them. And eventually you're going to notice that their walls will come down and their defenses will come down. And that's the point where you could start actually having a real conversation with them about it. But if you just need to sit there and agree with them until they feel like they've been heard, that's when you can actually go in and actually have a real conversation about them, about what went wrong, and and how to do better.
One of the benefits too of not criticizing, and I don't know if he mentioned it yet either, but and I really enjoy when I talk about this book to do it in the voice of the narrator who did the only audiobook rendition worth listening to. Have you listened to that one?
Yeah, I have. And
the guy who has kind of a gravelly voice. My friend and I, we would use the verb Carnegie. Like it's like, yeah, I'm gonna go. I got to see if I can Carnegie my way out of this or that, situation. And every time we would talk about like the sort of techniques that we used or whatever. No, far be it from me to think that if I were in your position, I would have done things differently. In fact, you've probably handled them in a far superior manner than I would have managed to bungle. Like just that kind of. That's the only real way to talk about this book. And if you really just kind of embrace that whole voice and embody the book, you'll really find your life improving. But one of the things is that if you're criticizing somebody, as opposed to complimenting the things that you appreciate about what they did, even if you have to do some real mental gymnastics to find one. And I'm going to fight to not do the voice, but you'll
Go ahead.
I can't do
Go
it.
ahead.
You'll find that the person you're talking to is much will acquiesce and find the flaws in their own actions. But
Yes,
really,
indeed.
it's very true.
Yeah.
I mean, if you really come at somebody and just talk about what a piece of shit they are, as opposed to just say, oh, this was pretty good. Well, I could have I could have done this, that, and the third. That's just the nature of humans. And is it I don't remember. You said your wife said it was it seems like manipulating people. That's like that's kind of a word that has some different connotations, I think, maybe in our culture than like other cultures. And I think he might even talk about it in that book. It's been so long since I've read it, but this idea of manipulation necessarily being a negative thing is that's not how everybody interprets that word.
And I completely disagree with it too, with the framing of it that way too. And yeah, it's like in China, this book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, is actually, the name of it is actually The Weakness of Humans.
Yes. Yeah, that's
I'm dead
that
serious.
makes me so happy. Oh man, that's 100. I'm about to text somebody right now. That's 100% no BS.
Yeah.
Oh,
No,
I can't
100%.
wait.
She told me that.
Okay.
She told me that oh yeah, I know this book. Yeah. It's we call it The Weakness of Humans in China.
That's amazing. That's incredible.
I'm gonna scratch out the title on my copy and just write that.
Mm-hmm. And but yeah, and I made the point to her, was like, well, no, the reason is that people like people who do this to them because it's a nice thing to do for them. It's not teaching you how to control people. It's teaching you how to be a person that people will like, for its own sake. I mean, you're giving them a good experience, with you. Go ahead.
I kind of agree with your wife, but I also agree with you, and that's why this book can be dangerous, is that it depends on your intention of reading it and the kind of person that you kind of are already. Because I could see someone totally reading this and being like, yeah, I'm going to manipulate the shit out of people. Negative connotation.
Oh yeah. Like when we get to the flattery chapter. Yeah. That's a deal. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, that is a way that, what comes to mind is like flattery will get you everywhere. And I was thinking, before we did this, that the power of the book is such that, you can, because it allows you to see behind the curtain and makes you more aware of like when people might be doing this to you. But the essence of this book is so powerful that you can kind of recognize when someone is doing it, and it can still work. And likewise, you can kind of Carnegie somebody, and they can kind of know that you're Carnegieing them. But it's this kind of unspoken, it's this unspoken thing where we just kind of know this is the human condition. It relies on kind of feeling where someone's coming from. It's just like, look, if you're going to like buy something, the person's going to try to massage it a little bit. You know what I mean? And it's just like it's like, hey, look. Or if you're trying to convince somebody to go out, they don't want to go out. Any situation, we know that we like this kind of thing, and it's just a wink at your own human condition, and just knowing that this is how things work. And you think about, and this is like something to get you deplatformed now, but you think about dealing with like women, and I'm quite a bit older than you, both of you, much more my junior. But just like there's a lot of girls out there that kind of want you to trick them into going out on a date. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not just, it's in us, and we don't have to love it, and we don't have to think it's the best, condition to have as animals, but just like, this is what it is. This is what it is. And so, it's like, what? I know you want to be Carnegie a little bit. We all want to be Carnegie. So I'm going to Carnegie a little bit, and it's not coming from a bad place.
Yeah, I really don't think this is a bad thing at all. I mean, you're giving people what they want. And
the thing too is, like, after reading this book, like after reading the whole thing and really digesting it, and if you try to manipulate people after reading this book and understanding it, you're just a soulless person anyway. Because I mean, you can't, basically it boils down to empathy, right? And the way that you can be the way that you can relate to people and kind of see what they're what makes them tick. And if you really do that to someone, there's no way that you can't have some sort of compassion or empathy for them. Like, really,
I mean, if you don't naturally have some empathy, you're not going to be able to use this anyway. And I really think this is what, when you're trying to weaponize your own autism, learning to weaponize empathy is like the way to go. Because once you understand people, what makes them tick, why they feel the way they feel, and you can, kind of go along with all of that instead of being, contrarian and opposed to all of that, that's very, very powerful. Like understanding that, like this was actually what helped me formed the archetropism framework, because I understood that, all leftists will always see themselves as the good guys. And so, and they're going to see this sort of good value somehow, some way. And it behooves me to try to understand and understand that this is where they're coming from. And there's no altering that. They're always going to see them, all bad people are always, are going to see themselves as the good guys. And, and it makes it really tough to tell who's who. It really does, because it's like the good guys think they're the good guys and the bad guys also think they're the good guys. Nobody thinks they're the bad guy. And, just understanding that about people, and that trying to make them feel like they're in the wrong, or they're they're the bad guy. It's like, it's like you're just going to turn them off and make them upset at you and alienate them. And I mean, maybe they're the sort of person you really want to alienate. In that case, go right on ahead. But but if you're in the persuasion business of the spread the message, or if you're like Joshua in the chat here, you're one of these people who's trying to run for office, understanding that this is where everybody is coming from is like critical to understanding how to deal with them, because you have to deal with them on the assumption that they're the good guy. Even if they're wrong, they're the good guy who's wrong. And understanding that about them, and having that as just an obvious assumption within any premise you're going in with, is the I mean, it's so critical to dealing with them. Or else they're just going to turn you off, and then they'll probably just dislike your message just because they dislike you.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I agree with that. And that's, I mean, especially that last part. It's not the message a lot of times; it's the person saying it, and that's just how it is with anything. You get that first impression, or you just rub someone the wrong way. You maybe use a word or anything it is. You don't even have to criticize them. It's just the way that you go about saying whatever it is that you're saying, and they're like, "Yep, I'm done with this. I don't even give a shit what you have to say." Yeah, no, I agree with that.
I agree. Let me go ahead and continue reading. And so I'm going to skip the section about Lincoln, because it's a long one. I don't really want to do that one.
Yeah,
but
I kind of like that last part about him, though. The last letter.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. You want to read that part?
I'm trying to find it because I didn't highlight it.
Yeah, because it basically what this letter is talking about is that one of Lincoln's generals, I think it was General Meade, he had General Robert E. Lee trapped, like between a river where he couldn't escape, and basically he was surrounded and unprotected, and basically this general, instead of attacking, he let Lee go, and
he essentially went against Lincoln's orders to attack him.
Yeah, and Lincoln had given him a direct order, like, don't call a war council, don't give him time to escape, just straight up attack, because we can end the war now. And General Meade hesitated, he didn't want to do it, and Robert E. Lee got away, and that prolonged the war indefinitely. And Lincoln had a bad experience with criticizing people really harshly earlier in life, where he had criticized the wrong person really, really harshly and kind of publicly embarrassed them. And this person came back and challenged him to a duel with broadswords. Yeah. And Lincoln, was that kind of like, not like it kind of emotionally scarred him for life, kind of. And that from that point on, he didn't go in with harsh criticism of people anymore, and he kept his tongue substantially more mild. And
people were dueling with broadswords during Lincoln's time. Really?
Yeah. Yep. Well, no, he was so Lincoln was. I think Lincoln was able to choose which weapon he used, and he decided to use the broadsword. So then he gets training by it and everything, and like
he had longer arms. That was the reason.
Yeah, that was why, exactly. Yeah, he had longer arms. He was a taller guy, and he figured he could do better with that. So he gets training from this guy in West Point, and then the day of the actual duel, two people kind of step in and say, "Hey, you guys can't do this."
Yeah, their seconds. Their seconds came in and said, "Okay, yeah, enough. We're not doing this."
Yeah, and thankfully for Lincoln, he didn't do it, or maybe, I don't know, maybe he would have won. Who knows? But thankfully he didn't. But this did stick in his mind. So then, flash forward to the war. what Andrew was talking about is he basically wrote a letter to this general that disobeyed his orders, and it was a pretty scathing letter, and he decided not to send it because he understood, based on his near death experience with the broadsword duel, that it's better to keep that thing to yourself, those kinds of things to yourself.
Lincoln wrote the email and then deleted the email.
Yeah, exactly.
Who knew?
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, that's something, that's a lesson. And I don't even know if everyone got that from Carnegie, but I remember hearing that as a kid. I don't know. I wouldn't have been email, but I think it was like write a letter and then light it on fire or whatever. But boy, is that a good one, because really, you have this whole, you have this, what you view as a masterpiece, for your own emotions, but like it is just 99% of the time so embarrassing, and it anyone with a little bit of life experience would just look into see, oh, this is for you. This serves you and your emotions, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
if you can be as right as you want, but it's just like, oh God, are you doing this for you?
Right.
It
Uh-huh.
just comes off as
And
gross.
it's so critical to, that point right there. It is so critical to separate that, because, when you're doing it and you're feeling good, understand they're feeling terrible about this. It's having the exact opposite effect on them. As good as you feel, it's not worth it to them. This is for them. This is a negative, and you're probably and because of this, your message is going to fall flat on its face, and they're probably just going to think you're an asshole, and that your message is probably worthless, and they should probably hate your whole ideology. And because it's like this is
Not that you're referencing anything specific.
Yeah, I'm not talking about libertarianism here, or because God knows I don't want to criticize.
Speaking of which, I would just like to say I just checked out the YouTube right here, and it doesn't appear that my avatar is showing, and that is very disappointing, because it is and you guys can't see it either.
Nope.
No.
I tried fixing it, but
it's definitely not an NPC, so it's kind of unfortunate
that is really terrible.
Mm-hmm.
It's me and Pete Quinones, and kind of like an awkward little photo that's actually from Tom Woods' house whenever we were there. And man, God, I had a whole bit that I was ready to go off on about how we're in a relationship, in a very difficult to describe relationship, and all the if you've ever listened to the Quinones episode, and he talks about for donations, it's actually because I'm very high maintenance, and he gives that money to me. But now I can't do any of that.
I would believe that. I know the picture. I've seen the picture, and after seeing that and hearing that story, I completely could see that being a real reality.
And I just want to highlight this.
To feel good.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight this comment because Joshua, he's always in the chat and he always kills it. Yeah. And this. Oh, look, Messina's got there it is. Messina's got his thing now.
It worked.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I accidentally closed StreamYard because I was just closing all the apps on the phone to save some battery, and it looked like I kind of angrily left the show as I was being chastised by Mr. Hartman. And then lo and behold, here comes the photo. It's back. That's great. Oh, serendipity.
Mm-hmm. How about that? Joshua is killing it in the chat as usual. And he made this comment: is the goal to win or to feel good? And this is why I question the Libertarian Party just a little bit, but because this is a that I say, hey, what's this about? It's like, are you going to you're going to have a principled message, and how is this going to come across to people that you've by doing this, you've already separated yourself from other people, and you've basically already sent this message that that these are unclean people, or that they are kind of lesser than you, or that you're going in with this idea that, hey, we are so very morally superior. And how are you really taking into account how this is going to come across to people? And I humbly suggest maybe rethink this, or maybe think of a way to not come across this way, understanding that you've already kind of crossed that line. You've already kind of crossed that Rubicon by choosing your platform, so to speak.
You know,
And go
if
ahead.
you're speaking in generalities, and look, I've got a lot of friends and stuff that I would consider libertarians, and a lot of times when we criticize, we're kind of dealing with like a caricature.
A little
But
bit.
That's with
but
anything for the most
yeah,
part.
that's with anything. But I will say this, for all any of the years that I've used the word libertarian to talk to people about anything, not one person has said, you know, I really don't agree with a lot of what they have to say, but man, they are likable people. Like no one,
No one's criticized us for
it's
that.
never happened. It's never happened.
No. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with that. You know, like a lot of time. Well, I'm in Chicago, and I'm in a pretty blue area of Chicago. And there's people that were like, whenever I talk about libertarian type things, they're, oh, I used to be a libertarian in college, or oh, you know, I knew a libertarian, they were fucking nuts, or you know, whatever.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know. Like I try not to even tell people, like just listen to my words. You know, don't I
Right.
don't want to tell you what. And but I mean, I don't even really consider myself a libertarian anymore. But
Yeah.
when I did, I tried not to say it out loud for the simple fact that a
Strong
lot
move.
of times that's all they have to
Yeah.
hear, like kind of be like, oh, fuck
At that
Yeah.
point, they can prejudge you pretty quickly.
yeah,
And I
And
don't want to derail it too much. I do want to tell my friend John, since I don't get a chance to talk to him as often as I would like to.
go ahead.
I'm loosely moving towards a very Buddhist mindset with a lot of things these days. I'm like misusing the word, but I think you probably know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I
Well,
just
that's
had to.
good.
I just
Well,
had to talk to my friend.
you know, that's one. Actually, I'm glad you kind of brought that up a little bit because I think, you know, what the word ego kept coming to mind every time we were talking about every time Andrew was, you know, saying anything. You know, like it has a lot to do with, you know, you have to drop your ego if you want people to like you.
Mm-hmm.
And the way to do that is to, you know, kind of shut up and listen. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and when you're able to shut up and listen and drop your ego, you find openings that weren't there before or
Mm-hmm.
that you didn't notice were there before. You know, so I think that's one of my main things with this book is that it kind of ties nicely into like the, you know, kind of mentality that I've already been in for a while.
And another thing that shutting up allows you to do is you don't if because everyone knows that you kind of have to you have to sort of play with the ego thing a little bit. But if you shut up, that's less time you have to do like a false humility thing, which most of the time people can kind of see through too. And it's also a little bit psychologically damaging. But you know, if you just if you just listen, you can still have all the confidence and all the everything else, but you don't have to do this like hemming and hawing of, you know, trying to make yourself saying words to make yourself out like you're humble. You can just shut up. You know,
Yeah.
it's just
Yes.
easier.
So here,
And
listen to this. So I do this like weekly meditation group that
Mhm.
sometimes there's 20 people, sometimes there's 10, sometimes there's just me and one other guy. Not I don't I'm not the teacher, but you know there's a teacher there, and one of the things that we do is um, we go through this kind of cycle where you know the bell rings and you have to talk and just talk about anything, and like you know it's just a conversation back and forth at first, you know where it's my topic, but then everyone kind of chimes in, and then we do another thing where you know it kind of goes around where it'll be three people that do that, and then the last thing that we do is we have one person talk, and the other two people that are listening can't nod their heads, they can't you know say anything back, they just have to listen, and it's so hard to do that to just sit there and listen, but it's also hard to sit there and talk. But this is like kind of what you were saying is like when you do this, it's just one of those things that everything kind of starts clicking and people start realizing like, okay, I don't have to like throw myself into this.
And this is actually, you know, the point that you and you know Messina just made really well. This is something C.S. Lewis said that really stuck with me, and like this one, you know, it changed my life. You know, because it completely changed the way I deal with people. That you know, the essence of humility isn't thinking less of yourself; it's thinking of yourself less.
Mm-hmm.
And you know,
Mm.
and that just made me go, whoa. And because like the way that someone will really perceive a truly humble person as it's just a nice person to get along with. He was really interested in me, and he didn't hog the conversation, and he pretty much just let me speak, and it seemed genuinely happy for me. And even that, and this and that just like it made me think, okay, if it's less of me, more of them, they're going to come away, from any interaction I have with them, feeling like they had a good conversation. And feeling and because I wasn't sitting there dominating it. I wasn't trying to respond at every single point they made. I kept my points short. I let them do like 75% of the talking, and they walked away thinking, gosh, what a good conversationalist Andrew is. And really they dominated it, and I kind of just let it happen because that's the actual function of that's a functional part of humility, is letting them do the talking, and and letting them have the good time, and above all else, again, don't criticize them. It's like that turns everything negative for them, and it ruins any chance you have of actually maybe reforming their behavior at all. And the he actually made this point about like, what if you really want to reform their behavior? What do what about that? And he says, skipping ahead a little bit, do you know someone you would like to change and regulate and improve? Good, that is fine. I'm all in favor of it. But why not begin on yourself? From a purely selfish standpoint, that is a lot more profitable than trying to improve others. Yes, and a lot less dangerous. Don't complain about the snow on your neighbor's roof, said Confucius, when your own doorstep is unclean. Let's see. Oh, I just lost my spot. When I was still young and trying hard to impress people, I wrote a foolish letter to Richard Harding Davis, an author who once loomed large on the literary horizon of America. I was preparing a magazine article about authors, and I asked Davis to tell me about the method of his work. A few weeks earlier, I had received a letter from someone with this notation at the bottom: dictated but not read. I was quite impressed. I felt that the writer must be very big and busy and important, and I wasn't the slightest bit busy, but I was eager to make an impression on Richard Harding Davis. So I ended my short note with the words dictated but not read. He never troubled to answer the letter. He simply returned it to me with this scribbled up across the bottom: your bad manners are exceeded only by your bad manners. True, I had blundered, and perhaps I deserved this rebuke. But being human, I resented it. I resented it so sharply that when I read of the death of Richard Harding Davis 10 years later, the one thought that still persisted in my mind, I am ashamed to admit, was the hurt he had given me. If you and I want to stir up resentment tomorrow that may rankle across the decades and endure until death, just let us indulge in a little stinging criticism, no matter how certain we are that it is justified. When dealing with people, let us remember that we are not dealing with creatures of logic. We are dealing with creatures of emotion, creatures bristling with prejudices and motivated by pride and vanity. Bitter criticism, caused the sensitive Thomas Hardy, one of the finest novelists to ever enrich English literature, to give up forever the writing of fiction. Criticism drove Thomas Chatterton, the English poet, to suicide. Benjamin Franklin, tactless in his youth, became so diplomatic, so adroit at handling people, that he was made American ambassador to France. The secret of his success? I speak ill of no man, he said, and speak all the good I know of everybody. Any fool can criticize, condemn, and complain, and most fools do. But it takes character and self-control to be understanding and forgiving. A great man shows his greatness, said Carlyle, by the way he treats little men. That's Thomas Carlyle. That's Yarvin's favorite dude. But Bob Hoover, a famous test pilot and frequent performer at air shows, was returning to his home in Las Vegas from the air show in San Diego. As described in the magazine Flight Operations, at 300 feet in the air, both engines suddenly stopped. By deft maneuvering, he managed to land the plane, but it was so badly damaged, although no one was hurt. Hoover's first act after the emergency landing was to inspect the airplane's fuel. Just as he suspected, the World War II propeller plane he had been flying had been fueled with jet fuel rather than gasoline. Upon returning to the airport, he asked to see the mechanic who had serviced his plane. The young man was sick with agony of his mistake. Tears streamed down his face as Hoover approached. He had just caused the loss of a very expensive plane and could have caused the loss of 3 lives as well. You can imagine Hoover's anger. One could anticipate, a tongue lashing, that this proud and precise pilot would unleash for that carelessness. But Hoover didn't scold the mechanic. He didn't even criticize him. Instead, he put his big arm around the man's shoulder and said, to show you, I'm sure that you'll never do this again. I want you to service my F-51 tomorrow. Often parents are tempted to criticize their children. You would expect me to say, don't, but I will not. I am merely going to say, before you criticize them, read one of the classics of American journalism, Father Forgets. It originally appeared as an editorial in the People's Home Journal, and we are reprinting it here with the author's permission as condensed in the Reader's Digest. Father Forgets is one of those little pieces which, dashed off in a moment of sincere feelings, strikes an echoing chord in so many readers as to become the perennial reprint favorite. Since its first appearance, Father Forgets has been reproduced, writes the author W. Livingston Larned, in hundreds of magazines and house organs and in newspapers the country over. It has been reprinted almost as extensively in foreign languages. I have given personal permission to thousands who wish to read it from school, church, and lecture platforms. It has been on the air on countless occasions and programs. Oddly enough, college periodicals have used it, high school magazines. Sometimes a little piece seems to mysteriously click. This one certainly did. Father Forgets by W. Livingston Larn. Listen, son, I am saying this as you lie asleep. One little paw crumpled under your cheek, and the blonde curls stickily wet on your damp forehead. I have stolen into your room alone. Just a few minutes ago, I sat reading my paper in the library. A stifling wave of remorse swept over me. Guiltily, I came to your bedside. There are things I was thinking, son. I had been cross to you. I scolded you as you were dressing for school because you gave your face merely a dab with a towel. I took you to task for not cleaning your shoes. I called out angrily when you threw some of your things on the floor. At breakfast, I found fault too. You spilled things. You gulped down your food. You put your elbows on the table. You spread the butter too thick on your bread. And as you started off to play, I made for my train. You turned and waved and called, "Goodbye, Daddy." And I frowned. I said in reply, "Hold your shoulders back." Then it began all over again in the late afternoon. As I came up the road, I spied you, down on your knees, playing with marbles. There were holes in your stockings. I humiliated you before your friends, by marching you ahead of me to the house. Stockings were expensive, and if you had to buy them, you would be more careful. Imagine that, son, from a father. Do you remember later, when I was in the library, how you came in timidly with a sort of hurt look in your eyes? I glanced up over my paper. Impatient at the interruption, you hesitated at the door. "What is it you want?" I snapped. You said nothing, but ran across and, in one tempestuous plunge, threw your arms around my neck and kissed me, with your small arms tightened around with an affection that God had set blooming in your heart, and which even neglect could not wither. And then you were gone, pattering upstairs. Well, son, It was shortly afterwards that my paper slipped from my hands and a terrible, sickening fear came over me. What has a habit been doing to me? The habit of finding fault, of reprimanding. This was my reward to you for being a boy. It was not that I did not love you. It was that I expected too much of youth. I was measuring you by the yardstick of my own years. And there was so much that this good and fine and true in your character. The little heart of you was as big as the dawn itself over the wide hills. This was shown by your spontaneous impulse to rush in and kiss me goodnight. Nothing else matters tonight. My son, I have come to your bedside in the darkness and have knelt there ashamed. It is a feeble atonement. I know you would not understand these things if I told them to you during your waking hours. But tomorrow I will be a real dad. I will chum with you and suffer when you suffer. I will laugh when you laugh. I will bite my tongue when impatient words come. I will keep saying, as if it were a ritual, he is nothing but a boy, a little boy. I am afraid I have visualized you as a man. Yet, as I see you now, son, crumpled and weary in your cot, I see that you are still a baby. Yesterday you were in your mother's arms, your head on her shoulder. I have asked too much, too much. Instead of condemning people, let's try to understand them. Let's try to figure out why they do what they do. That's a lot more profitable and intriguing than criticism. And it breeds sympathy, tolerance, and kindness. To know all is to forgive all. As Dr. Johnson said, God himself, sir, does not propose to judge man until the end of his days. Why should you and I? End of chapter 1. Principle number 1, don't criticize, condemn, or complain. Wow. That's a lot. And I really like what he said a little bit earlier, where he said that any fool can criticize, condemn, and complain, and most fools do. But it takes character and self-control to be understanding and forgiving. A great man shows his greatness, said Thomas Carlyle, by the way he treats little men. And I feel like that's, for people who, a group of people who generally hold themselves up as a lot more intelligent, a lot more erudite and read, and a lot more philosophical in nature, it really, it's like by nature you see yourself as better. Maybe perhaps that's merited, perhaps not. But you really do a disservice to yourself when you when you take that approach to people publicly, especially to their face. And it's like, and when you're criticizing them, largely for believing what they believe because this is simply what they were always taught, and you're not. I feel like that is what really, you're when you try to take their heroes away from them, like you call Lincoln a blood-soaked monster, he is. But when you try to take their heroes from you try to take their beliefs from them, and you do it in a hard to swallow way. This is the sort of thing that's going to make them not want to hear the rest of your message, which is probably substantially more important than whatever you had to say about Lincoln. And for a spread the message sort of mindset, it really does behoove you to be a good messenger and to understand where people are coming from. They were always raised these ways. They were always raised to believe what they believe. And perhaps, a lot of that is wrong, that a lot of what they believe is wrong, okay, fair enough. But it does not help you to, really criticize them harshly, for what they believe to be good and true. And it really helps a lot more if you meet them where they are and try and understand that these are good people who want to be good and see themselves as good. And when you try to, and when anything you say tries to put them in the wrong, that is where you're killing it. You're killing any value you might have had by in this interaction with them, and they're not going to want to have future interactions with you. And the lesson of chapter 1 really is: don't criticize, don't complain, and understand that, if you praise people for doing right, they will do that right more. If you criticize them for, what they did, for what they believe being wrong, but, you're just not going to get anywhere. And, maybe, and, like for me with the left, everyone knows I despise them. I have no intention of, ever trying to persuade these people because I know that's folly. And when I behave the way I do towards the left, it's because I have no intention of trying to ever persuade them, and I have no intention of trying to convert them or whatever. I know how they see themselves. I understand it, and I know there's no altering that, and there's no point in trying. And whereas with the right, I really do see them as people who are like often misguided, but they're well intentioned, and I can meet them where they are with that intention, and with patience and understanding, try to move them closer to where I am, and that's usually worked out for me very, very well. And because I don't meet them with this idea that that I think less of them, or that I think that they are, committing some, evil, or they're complicit in something I believe is wrong or whatever. And if I ever say something like, "Oh, taxation is theft," and they respond with, "Well, okay, but we need something for like schools or something like that," instead of saying, "Oh, well, these are public indoctrination centers," immediately, I might say that eventually, but I might start with, "Well, yeah, I mean, look, we all would understand the need to educate our children. And we don't want our kids to grow up dumb and stupid and not know how to read and write, and because obviously these are important things, because that's the way they think. They're thinking through in their head that these are good things for my children. How can that be wrong?" That's how they think it through, and it's a very superficial way of thinking, but this is how they all do it. And to start with, "Well, no, you're just like and people, they also tend to like their teachers, they tend to like their police. And when you're coming in with this attitude of all teachers are child molesters, or all teachers are complicit in abuse, this is simply untrue.
Yeah.
And this is all you're going to do is paint yourself as an asshole for saying, even if you're right, and okay, you might not be wrong about some of those things, perhaps the cops, you might not be wrong about them, but do you want to get the right result, or do you want to get the right feeling? Do you want the moral satisfaction or of saying the right thing, or do you want the satisfaction of getting the moral result, to where these people begin behaving better, or they begin voting better, or believing in better things and higher ideals? I really think that this is this chapter 1 is like the best of the not like the best of the books, but this is easy. There's quite a few chapters in this book. Chapter 1 is definitely in the top 5 of most important principles of dealing with people, understanding that they are coming at the world. Their entire worldview is centered on the idea that they're the good guys, and everybody, even the worst of the worst, thinks he's a good guy. I guarantee you, Hitler and Stalin all would have said, "I don't know how I could have done differently." I guarantee, I haven't read them, but I guarantee that, if we could, resurrect them and get a straight answer out of them, they would both agree they did the right thing at the right time, for whatever the reasons they thought were right. Everyone sees themselves as the good guy. And when you as just a common individual try to approach them as if they're the bad guy, or that, they're complicit in some sort of evil, they're going, all of their defense mechanisms are going to go up, because they never want to believe that. And it always behooves you. It always is to your benefit and to the benefit of your beliefs and your belief system to approach people from that assumption that they're the good guy, and that they're doing good things they're doing whatever they're doing for reasons that they think are right and good, and not for reasons that they think are evil. And to approach them with that assumption in mind, and that everything you say to them should obviously have that assumption built into it. All right, monologue over. Which one of you wants to take that?
I don't know. I just wanted to say first off with that poem, is awesome. I love it, man. Like,
Yeah.
I read it. You know, I just picked up this book, like I said earlier, when I knew that we were going to be talking about it. When you told me that you wanted to talk about it, is when I grabbed it. But since I, you know, which was months ago, right? But
Yeah.
since I read this, I must have read that poem like, you know, once a week, once every couple weeks.
It's powerful.
You know, as a parent, like I completely understand this, you know, and it's very hard to do right by your kids sometimes with the habits that life gets into. So I just wanted to say that, like, that's pretty awesome. The other thing was that Joshua Ham said that attacking the right from the right doesn't have to be actually attacking. It can be, yes, I agree, and, like, you know,
You should agree with the right from the right. We don't attack. See that? I mean, even right there, libertarians are kind of tilting their hand about their emotional immaturity. Not to criticize, but you know, it's not to attack. You're not trying to attack people. You want to agree with them from the right, and you know, I agree with you. And you know, I think perhaps this is a more peaceful way of doing that will be more effective and more in line with human behavior. Because look at X, Y, and Z results that this that this causes that are not in line with our values, and and it's just simply a wasting of resources or whatever. And like and Joshua Ham, you're just killing it today. Yeah. It's like you don't really attack people. You do attack the left. Yeah. So we're still going to attack them because we're not trying to persuade them. They're not persuadable. It's like, let's not even bother with that. So the left, you still give them both barrels, but but for like the right or libertarians or just normies who are, fairly non-political, this is a better way of dealing with them. That yes, I agree, and
I think I do have to disagree with you with the left and just not entirely, because I understand where you're coming from, and I mostly agree with you. But coming from somewhere where you're mostly left leaning, you don't know any better. You don't know really that there's anything different. You never hear the other perspectives. So I can't say that unequivocally they're hopeless. I would say there's probably a majority of them are ones that actually gave some serious thought to it. But there's a lot that just like, oh well, my grandparent and my parents and now me.
Okay.
And you know what I mean? Like,
fair enough. Yeah. That's where they're coming from.
But that's I agree with you, but I don't, and that's why, because like
fair enough.
If there's but yeah,
I agree with that disagreement.
Yeah. I don't know what else to say after that. Steve, you got anything? I
think Steven might be dead.
Oh, is he?
It's like he went the way of Matt. I know. He unfortunately he might have used the wrong promo code. He might have used promo code King, and this is what happens.
I don't know if you saw like a while ago. They were talking about a promo code.
Are you guys talking about going to palomaverde.com to get your CBD products and using promo code King to save 25% on orders of $75 or more? Is that what you guys are talking about?
Don't use that one. That one will give you distilled Hillary Clinton urine. You want to use promo code popular to support the show at Paloma Verde CBD gummies. Use promo code popular for 25% off your orders over $75 and free shipping. And you should definitely try these strawberry lemonade gummies because these are excellent. I take them every night. Before I go to bed, I take one right before I go on any show, and I take them in the morning too because I take a buttload of stimulants and Smarty Pants pills. And they always call me a trimmer like that. And I take these in order to take the edge off, so I get all of the smart and none of the side effects. And these are excellent.
If you don't want to get your CBD products from a drug addict that Andrew is slowly sort of revealing himself to be, remember to use promo code King at pawn checkout.
And I'm nobody. I don't even have a promo code, but I don't.
Well, you're John Hartman. You don't need one. You're great. And we're gonna mute Steve for one moment while I tell you about how much better promo code popular is. You see, Matt, he's been driving home from Texas, and I'm sorry to say, but he didn't make it. See, he was in the truck and he used promo code King and he just drove straight off the cliff. That's what happens with promo code King, is you will drive off the cliff. And unfortunately, Matt is now just another COVID statistic. I'm kidding, but he is survived by Amy and Eastwood, and maybe Steve can step in and help out. But Steve, you got anything to say? No, about the book, not the CVD. We both know you have a sucky promo code, but
I just thought it was a clever ruse that I just saw. The host has you muted as you were asking me a question.
Yep.
What authoritarian bullshit? If libertarian Steve may interject. But I just love the book. I can't tell if we're wrapping up. If this is closing thoughts.
We're wrapping up.
Okay, yeah, no, it's it immediately affected my life. Like the Machiavellians is a great book, and it makes you kind of understand the way of the world. And I guess it affected my life insofar as, what I'm on now, pretty much in terms of the decision tree for any kind of action is, hey, are you a member of the ruling elite, or like in any way capable of influencing them whatsoever? No. Oh, well, and then I just go about my life a la John Hartman, or I aspire. But how to win friends and influence people is something that even I don't.
Yeah, this really is like the Machiavellians for autism. I mean, it opens your eyes really to the way humans work, and all of them. And it's like, this book, reading it really changed my way of thinking, because I used to be really socially awkward, and like I did not understand people. I kind of took them at their word that they were all these rational humans. I bought hook, line, and sinker into all the lies of liberalism. And and this was like kind of the first book I remember that really started taking me away from that and understanding, people are, they actually are as they appear, which is not at all the way liberalism likes to depict them. They, the title, when my wife told me about this again, that, the title of this book, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, is, in China, is the weakness of human beings, or something like that. And
crack me up every time I hear
it's so true. It's so true. And I could see exactly why the Chinese would would frame it that way. But this, it just, it really changes your view of humans, but it does it in a way that, like, you don't look down on them, you get cynical, or you just, like, you get it, you understand them, and you kind of like them for it. It's like
it yourself. You can see the things, and that's what makes it palatable. Is like, oh shit, like I'm not, because it's true about yourself. So you have to no one knows the author of this book anymore, especially. So it's like, holy shit. Well, if he knew this, and he wasn't talking about me specifically, he's talking about everybody in general, then maybe I'm not as special as I think I am. Maybe everyone is this way. And because you understand that, it's a lot easier to just, go with the flow of influencing people and having them become your friends.
I think so. Yeah, it's always easier to deal with people as your friends, than it is with them as your enemies. Again, because power likes to coexist with power. That's the first law of archotropism. That there's more value in power cooperating, et cetera. Okay, enough. I digress. But yeah, it's easier to cooperate with them as your friends and influence them that way, without criticizing them, without making it a negative experience for them. Because let's face it, who do you really care about taking about if you're going to criticize people? Is it better that it comes from a friend or comes from someone that they dislike? Because if it's coming from someone they dislike, they're just gonna write. They don't care. It's like, when people criticize me on Twitter, they're perfect strangers to me. I don't give a shit. And it's like, block, mute, done. And but like if one of you took me aside, said, Andrew, you've been kind of a real asshole to to X, Y, and Z person. It's like, I'm all right. This guy's my friend. I might take that a little bit more seriously because you got already put in the work of, making me like you.
This is exactly correct, and this is what I was thinking earlier, as in the show, was that withholding criticism, like you don't have to do it all the time. You can criticize someone after they already like you, because now it means something to them, right? It's like, oh shit, like I love Andrew and he's telling me this shit. Maybe it's true, He's not going to tell me, we have this relationship at this point in time where he's not going to tell me something that's not true about myself, and you can definitely withhold, but not completely take away criticism. It's kind of like a time preference thing, right?
Yeah. Deferring gratification. You're deferring the gratification that you're going to feel good about criticizing people and being morally self-righteous. And you're going to defer that entirely. Get rid of that. That's not worth anything. It's just feelings. So it's stupid. Your feelings are stupid is what I'm trying to say. And defer that entirely and get the more, and control your tongue. Don't complain. Don't criticize. Control yourself and, give them the good feeling. And then that's going to come back to you in the form of a better result. Good point right there. I hadn't thought of it as a deferral of gratification, but
that's just how in sync John Hartman and I are, and that's my current North Star is John Hartman. But when you were saying that, that's what my exact thought was. Just like it's a time preference thing. It's just kind of zooming out and just realizing, it's. At first I must win your trust, and then when I have it, I can use it to my favor and the benefit of everyone. Sorry, I did the narrator. I just encourage everybody to just find that audio.
You guys
book.
are simpatico. Good point, John Messina.
No, I love it.
I'm gonna have to get in that picture. I'm gonna have to get between Pete and Steven,
Steven Hartman and John Messina.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, thank you for joining us tonight. Plugs. John, you go first.
Yeah, I don't really have anything right now. You could check me out at YouTube at Mind Your Business. It's been kind of slow on that front. I've been working on all these paintings here. For those of you watching, like I've been doing that a lot and that kind of thing. I'm also working on.
You've been you've definitely been taking some plants, I should say. I can tell from those drawings.
Well, actually, I've always done this. It's just now I know what they mean.
Yeah, it's like I see that geometry and all that in there, and that I'm like, oh, I know where this comes from.
Yeah, actually, it's funny because I started this probably right around in high school, and I don't know if you've ever read Carl Jung at all, but this is kind of similar to like the Mandalas that he always talks about.
Okay.
In my mind, like I don't know, but yeah, that's another.
They're well done. I like the colors.
Check me out. I'm sorry.
They're well done. I like the colors.
Thank you. Check me out on YouTube at Mind Your Business. I'm on Twitter too, but no one.
You've been like dead to the world on Twitter lately.
Yeah, on Twitter I'm like completely dead. Instagram I have at 7 Fingers Studio. That's like for my art stuff. And I just kind of go with the flow of life, I'll do my videos on YouTube when I feel like I want to, and I do everything that way,
Have you taken an what is it, an Enneagram, John?
I don't know what that is.
Okay, yeah, well, yeah, that doesn't surprise me, and that's a compliment, by the way.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not really well read or educated. Like high school is the highest education point I've ever had. I mean, I'm a plumber, and I learned how to do that and everything. I've been doing that for a while, but like I didn't go to college or anything. So a lot of this stuff that like, you guys talk about on your show or Andrew talks about on his show, or any of you guys really, like I have to kind of Google and like research on my own. So
no, John is really
he's being humble.
John's really selling himself short here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to agree.
Yeah.
Boy, you're underselling yourself here, buddy.
I'm thinking of just the idea, if anyone wants their ass handed to them by a plumber in any kind of debate, no, and John's not even particularly inclined to debate, but just could.
Could.
But yeah, no, I don't remember what I was gonna say. God damn it, Enneagram is just some dumb pop culture personality thing, but maybe there's like good sides. I don't really know, but it would
Well,
just
now
be
I'm kind of interested. I love dumb pop culture.
yeah. And I don't know how dumb pop culture it is. I just know like college girls are like into Enneagram stuff, but they are kind of intriguing. You know, and I just it makes me when you talk about what you're doing here, it just really makes me wonder what number your Enneagram results. But anyway, just
Figure this
food
out.
for,
I'm
food for
sure
thought.
You Steven.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you'd like me to pique your interest, dear listener, you can maybe check out King Pilled when we're not on some sort of weird abrupt hiatus. But yeah, I think YouTube is probably the primary place for King Pilled. I am not silent on Twitter, and I don't know what I'm doing on Twitter, but I'm definitely doing something. I'm either just just like dumb as a bag of hammers, or 300 years ahead of the conversation on Twitter.
Well, where if you don't want to find Steve on Twitter, where you can find him is at subscribestar/kingpilled. He has a wonderful Discord server where
yes,
you can find him and he will talk with you as if you're an intelligent human being instead of a pleb. And
right.
that's it. And you can sign up there. Did I get the URL for that right?
You'd have to contact Matthew Erickson for that, but
well, he's dead, so I mean,
yeah, he's dead.
He used the wrong promo code, and these things happen. And,
the world may never know.
I know, but anyway, if you want to find me and talk more about this, you can find me at @popularliberty_ on Twitter, and you can also follow the link in the description to subscribestar.com/popular-liberty, and you can subscribe to me there, help fund the show, help me fight a war on personal poverty, and we can and we can chat there. Again, y'all, this is a book that has absolutely changed my life, and I could not recommend it to you more. We will do more of these in the future because this is a long book and we can get quite a lot of content out of this, and I will certainly milk it for every single last little drop of content. But this really, if you want to just radically change the way you deal with people for the better and make yourself a substantially more successful human being, right here. All right, y'all. Thanks for tuning in. And if you're watching this in the future, hit me up on Twitter or subscribe to me at subscribestars.com/popular-liberty. And I'll see you then. Thanks, guys.
Peace.